The sorrow in her eyes was the kind seen in old women who had buried children and husbands, a sorrow too heavy for a child's face. She was hungry, not the kind of hunger that made your stomach grumble, but the kind that made your vision dizzy and your bones cry out in pain. In the corner of the backyard was the goat's shade. She crouched beside one of the family goats. With trembling hands, she squeezed the goat's breast. The goat bleated, a high pitiful sound that pierced the night. But she didn't stop. She drank the warm raw milk, and tears flowed silently from her eyes. She wasn't a stranger in that house. It was her father's house. But in that same house, she was treated like an orphan. In fact, she was an orphan because she lived with her stepmother, Madame Helen. And Helen was the most heartless and dangerously wicked stepmother any child can ever have in this world. In a large mansion in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria, lived a girl whose life was nothing short of a nightmare stitched with cruelty. Her name was Ukeme. She was 9 years old, and unfortunately, she has the worst stepmother anyone can have.
Ukeme, you this useless, good-for-nothing rag of a child. Did I not tell you to finish cleaning all the rooms in this mansion before 7 o'clock and prepare my breakfast? Look at your head, like soaked bread. I will soon throw you into the gutter where your witchcraft spirit belongs. You are lazy like your dead mother. From morning till night, you are crawling around like a sick goat, yet nothing useful comes up of your miserable life.
Madame Helen is Ukeme's stepmother and shockingly her auntie at the same time. Helen was an attractive woman with irresistible curvaceous body shape that can cause a traffic in the desert. But her heart, unfortunately, was pitch black and filled with venomous wickedness. Ukeme's biological father, Mr. Eddie, was a rich man because he inherited his late father's petrol stations, and Eddie has competent managers to handle the business because as a person he was very useless. A drunk that chases everything in skirts like his soul was allergic to self-control. Mr. Eddie had once had a wife called Alice, but after her death giving birth to Ukeme, Eddie married Alice's younger sister, Helen, or Madame Helen as she liked to be called. Despite Helen being Alice's younger sister, Madame Helen treated her own niece, Ukeme, like a stray dog. She looked Ukeme in the eye one morning and said with venom,
"Don't ever call me auntie. I am not your family. I only adopted you out of pure mercy, and don't forget that."
But that so-called mercy came dressed in wickedness, starvation, beatings, insults, and back-breaking house chores from dawn to dusk, as if Ukeme's very existence was a crime she was being punished for daily. Ukeme should have been in school. She was a brilliant girl, always first position in her class, but unfortunately, Madame Helen withdrew her from school. "She doesn't need school," Helen barked, tearing Ukeme's notebook into pieces. "You are not worth the waste of school fees. Your place is in this house, sweeping floors and washing toilets till your fingers fall off. You imbecile of a child." Ukeme's eyes welled up with silent tears as she picked her torn school books. She loved school with all her heart. She wanted to grow up and become a qualified nurse, to wear the white uniform with pride and help people in pain. But now, her dreams were being swept away. So Ukeme, at the age of 9 years, became a full-time housemaid in her father's house, who is married to her late mother's younger sister. In the back corner of the big compound sat a small goat house. It had some few goats, and the goat shed smells of dung and goat urine. Yet, this became Ukeme's room. She slept there every night, not because there was no space in the mansion, but because Madame Helen, in her wickedness, made it so.
Go and stay with your mates. Yes, those goats are your brothers and sisters, you bastard orphan.
From that day, Ukeme slept beside goats, her tiny mat squeezed between goat sheets and peace. The goats, though just ordinary animals, seemed to sense Ukeme's sorrow. The goats became her only friends. It did not make sense why Madame Helen hated Ukeme so much, because Ukeme was a good child, obedient, quiet, hardworking. She didn't talk back, she didn't steal, she didn't complain, and yet Helen treated her like the feces beneath her slippers. It was not as if Helen did not have her own child. In fact, she had her own daughter, Sandra, a child the same age as Ukeme. Sandra was pampered like a princess, dressed in expensive attires with shiny beads in her hair. But Ukeme wore rags, stitched with old thread. And for what reason? Ukeme thought to herself. She just could not understand why Helen's heart was filled with pure, undiluted wickedness. One evening, while Ukeme knelt to scrub Sandra's room for the third time in the day, Helen looked down at her with cold, poisonous eyes and said,
"Listen well, you filthy thing. Don't you ever call my husband your father again. He has only one child in this house, and that is Sandra. And I'm not your auntie either. See yourself as an orphan. Yes, you are an orphan. Accept it. You are nothing but an unwanted filthy element, and I remind you of it every single day."
And she did. Day by day, insult by insult, slap by slap, she reminded Ukeme that in that mansion, she was nothing but an inconsequential bastard. Not a daughter to her father, not a niece to her auntie, and definitely not a cousin to Sandra. She was expected to see herself as an ordinary orphan. Her father, Mr. Eddie, who is meant to protect his own daughter, Ukeme, the child of his late wife, Alice, was busy getting drunk and chasing after women, leaving Ukeme alone in her sorrow. Ukeme would work from morning till night, washing clothes with bare hands until her fingers bled, sweeping every tile in the 8-bedroom mansion, scrubbing toilets while gasping in chemical fumes, and still she would go to bed hungry. "No food for lazy children," Helen shouted one night after Ukeme had been working all day. That night, she was sent to the goat house without food. Ukeme was very hungry and trembling. She did something desperate. She drank the milk of a goat, not processed milk, not bottled milk, fresh, direct from the breast of the goat. With her tiny hands, she would whisper apologies to the goats and press gently. The milk was warm, salty and strange, but it kept her alive. And that was how she survived, because Madame Helen wanted to starve her to death. But Ukeme's only friends, the goats, kept her alive with their milk. There were days when Madame Helen's cruelty peaked. One such day, after Ukeme mistakenly broke a tray of glass plates, Madame Helen did the unthinkable. She hissed and went into the toilet with a plate. She returned holding the plate with her feces on the plate. She gave the plate of shit to Ukeme. Then she went into the kitchen and brought out a pot of edikaikong soup. And she commanded Ukeme to eat the feces using the soup as a punishment for breaking the glass plates. "Take it, eat it," she said, placing the abomination before the starving child. "Eat this special fufu with edikan soup." Ukeme looked at the brownish, smelly and warm substance. She shook her head slowly, crying sorrowfully.
"Please, ma, please. Please do forgive me. It was a mistake."
"Eat the food, you bastard child," Helen screamed. She dragged Ukeme by the hair, pushed her to the ground, and forced Ukeme to eat a handful of the abomination. It was one of the worst days in Ukeme's life. Helen's daughter, Sandra, the same age as Ukeme. Where Ukeme slept with goats, Sandra had a room with a pink princess bed, air conditioning, and a cupboard full of toys. But Sandra was wicked too. She was her mother's daughter. She would steal money and hide it in Ukeme's clothes. Helen would find it and beat Ukeme with electric wire, twist her ears, and pour hot water on her back. One day, Sandra took her mother's gold jewelry and maliciously dropped it in Ukeme's bag in the goat shade. Helen found the jewelry in Ukeme's bag. "Thief! Thief!" she screamed, dragging Ukeme outside. Ukeme tried to explain that she never stole anything, but Helen tied her to the car with a rope, started the engine, and dragged her around the compound. Ukeme's skin tore open, her elbows scrapped like yam peeled with broken bottle. Her mouth bled. And when Mr. Eddie came back home that evening, he was too drunk to care about Ukeme's bleeding body. Despite Madam Helen being financially taken care of by her rich husband, she occasionally sends Ukeme out into the hot sun to hawk bottled water in Uyo's city burning sun. From Abak Road to Itam Market, barefooted, thirsty, a 9-year-old girl suffering for no reason. "If you don't finish selling those bottled water," Helen warned Ukeme, "I will put pepper between your legs, I swear." And she did it, because Ukeme unfortunately came back with just one bottled water out of 100. And just because of that one, Helen blended hot Cameroon pepper and rubbed it between Ukeme's legs. She screamed like crazy, and since that day, Ukeme begs strangers for money to complete the balance for 100 bottles of water any day she's unable to sell the whole 100 bottles. It was in desperation to sell all her bottled water that she met a mechanic. A bearded man with grease-stained hands. He smiled kindly and said, "Little girl, come inside, come inside. I won't buy all your water, come inside." Little naive 9-year-old Ukeme entered the small shelter in the mechanic workshop, but the mechanic man locked the door. Ukeme became frightened. He closed her mouth with his big hands and violated her. When it was over, she ran back to the mansion, crying, broken, and blood bleeding from her thighs. Ukeme reported the strange incident to Helen because little innocent Ukeme didn't even know what happened to her. But Helen picked her biggest whip and flogged the hell out of her.
"Liar, you are just a prostitute in the making. A shower at the age of 9. You're rich."
Ukeme slept that night beside the goats, shivering in pain with tears flowing freely. She cried and called upon the spirit of her late mother, Alice. One of the female goats came closer to offer her milk, but she did not drink because her heart was covered with unbearable sorrow. One evening, Ukeme returned from hawking bottled water and came back with 2 bottles left. It had rained, business was bad, and all the people she begged money did not give her. Helen didn't want to hear stories about rainfall. She heated an electric pressing iron and pressed it on Ukeme's bare back. Ukeme screamed and temporarily ran mad. She ran around the compound in pain. She wanted to run outside, but the gate was locked. Her skin was burning. You can literally smell the meat burning from Ukeme's body. Even Mr. Eddie, who rarely intervened, was shocked at the display of wickedness. But when he tried to talk to Madam Helen, his wife, she said to him, "You useless womanizer, better take that your dirty alcohol-smelling mouth out of here and allow me to raise this orphan that you kept in this house." Mr. Eddie quietly went to his bedroom. He did not have strength to quarrel with Helen. One rainy night, the house was quiet. Madam Helen had gone for a 2-day church camp with her daughter, Sandra. Mr. Eddie came back home very drunk. Ukeme was sleeping in the goat house, hugging a small dirty pillow stained with tears. Eddie stumbled into the goat shade and said to her, come here, come here. And then he did the unthinkable. He tried to get on top of her. Ukeme, sensing that what happened in the mechanic workshop was about to happen again, quickly ran out of the goat house and wanted to run out of the compound, but the main gate was locked. She then, in confusion, ran into the living room in the mansion. But Eddie captured her there and had carnal knowledge of his own daughter. The sun was shy that Thursday morning, hiding behind soft cotton clouds, as if heaven itself was anticipating what was about to unfold. Ukeme balanced the cold burden of bottled water cooler on her small head.
Buy table water. 200 naira table water. Buy water.
She called, her voice like a choked whistle, thin and unsure. She reached a bus stop where two state civil servants in their lemon green uniform waved her over to question her why she was hawking water and not in school. As she bent to set the cooler down, her tattered t-shirt lifted slightly, and that was when the world collapsed. A jagged, map-like scar glared from her back, shaped like the imprint of a hot pressing iron. Old wounds, unforgotten burns, the kind of horror that time alone cannot erase. There were lash marks across her shoulder, cigarette burns near her waist, and the faint scars from what looked like wires. A hush fell upon the street. The civil servants, who were mothers themselves, shouted, "Abasingbong, God, who did this to you?" Ukeme flinched, her hands trembling. She grabbed the cooler and tried to run, but the state workers blocked her path gently. My Pekin, we are not trying to harm you. We want to help you. Please tell us, who gave you all these injuries, burns, and whip marks all over your body? They asked her kindly. And passers-by also stopped and encouraged Ukeme to talk. That was how the floodgates opened, and the poor little 9-year-old girl, with trembling voice and tears in her eyes, told them everything that Madame Helen does to her. Within the next hour, Ukeme was in a police station, and the child rights and welfare were called in immediately. The police set up a trap and followed Ukeme home quietly like shadows. Madame Helen was busy seasoning cow leg in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm about to happen. The arrest was swift. Helen was dragged out of her mansion, and she was protesting wildly with arrogance. "I have never touched this girl, oh," she screamed. "She is lying. She's a witch. I mean, think about it. How can I maltreat my own late sister's child?" Her words were falling on deaf ears as the police handcuffed her, and with the child welfare officers, they marched towards the police van parked nearby. The neighborhood gathered, murmuring and recording the incident with their phones and posting it on social media. Even at the police station, Helen kept denying, and she wanted to use her money to quickly bail herself. But the child rights welfare director, Mrs. Iniebong, took it upon herself to personally ensure that this case is followed appropriately, because the bruises and burns on Ukeme's body was the most shocking thing Iniebong had ever seen in her 20 years of working on cases like this. She got a warrant to look at the CCTV camera footages that were installed in the living room, the kitchen, and the mansion compound. And what they found sickened even the most hardened officers. They were recordings of Helen using plier to pinch Ukeme's earlobes until they bled. Another video footage clip showed when Helen poured hot pepper into Ukeme's private parts. There was one where Helen was pouring hot water on Ukeme's bare back and whipping her with cane. And then the most horrifying video of all, Mr. Eddie. The man they all thought was just a quiet man who did not do enough to protect his daughter was also a monster himself. In one of the video footages, they saw Eddie chasing Ukeme all over the compound. And another clip recorded when Ukeme ran into the living room and how Eddie went after her and violated her. The officers were flabbergasted. The law moved fast. Eddie was arrested immediately. His hands were trembling and he wet himself during interrogation. The court case between the Child Care Welfare representing Ukeme against Mr. Eddie and Mrs. Helen made headline news nationwide. In the courtroom, however, something unexpected happened. A tall, elegant woman walked in, Mrs. Emmen by name. She was Alice's best friend when Alice was alive, and she requested to testify. You remember Alice? She was Eddie's first wife and Ukeme's real mother. Alice is also Helen's older sister. I may go to jail for what I am about to say, Emmen began, her voice a fragile whisper. But I can't die with this secret. The courtroom went quiet. Mrs. Emmen began to unravel a story that she said took her years to piece the evidence together and wanted the whole world to hear it. Years ago, Mr. Eddie came to Alice's village with his relatives for the traditional marriage rites to marry Alice. It was a beautiful event, but something happened that day. While the marriage event was going on, Eddie saw Helen, Alice's younger sister, for the first time. She was curvaceous, confident, and wore a wrapper that clung to her waist like a scandal. And later, she changed to a tight-fitting dress that emphasized her curves. Eddie, though the bridegroom, lusted after Helen, his sister-in-law, instead of staying loyal to Alice, his bride. After the wedding, he began a secret affair with Helen. The both of them were very secretive at first, that my best friend, late Mrs. Alice, did not suspect a thing. Then came the pregnancies. My friend Alice got pregnant, and I believe Helen also got pregnant that same period. So Mr. Eddie rented an undisclosed apartment for Helen to stay and keep her pregnancy a secret. As fate would have it, Alice and Helen went into labor the same day. My dearest friend Alice had sent me a text.
Amen, my good friend. It's time. I am going into labor.
Without hesitation, I grabbed my bag and rushed to the hospital to be beside my friend Alice, my heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. As I got to the corridor of the hospital, catching my breath, I suddenly spotted Eddie, Alice's husband, pacing and talking on the cell phone. He didn't see me. He was too consumed in his conversation, but I heard him clearly. His voice was low, but urgent. I am coming over, my dear. I will take you to the hospital to deliver our baby, he said. My stomach turned. Our baby? I froze, unable to believe what I had just heard. Eddie walked into Alice's room and told her calmly that he was stepping out for a bit. Before she could ask questions, he left in a hurry. I entered the room, trying to steady my voice. Alice, weak and in pain, asked me with tears in her eyes, Emmen, did you see Eddie just now? He left in such a rush. Did you see him talking to someone over the phone? Did you overhear anything, my good friend? I hesitated, but the truth refused to stay hidden. I nodded and responded, Yes, Alice, I heard him say he's going to take someone to the hospital to deliver their baby. Alice's face darkened like a sky before a storm. Tears welled in her eyes, and she said, I knew it. I have been suspecting him recently. I even installed a tracker on his phone. Emmen, please take my phone and track him. Find out the truth. Please, my friend. I obeyed. My heart was beating like a drum as I tracked Eddie's car to a hidden part of town. There, he picked up heavily pregnant Helen, Alice's own younger sister. My blood went cold. They went straight to another hospital. I followed them in and, disguised by covering my face with my shawl, pretending to be a patient waiting for lab results. Helen was taken into the delivery room. Minutes later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I peeped through the open curtain, my heart breaking in slow motion. My stomach churned with betrayal. Eddie, the man who once swore to love Alice forever, had fathered a child with her younger sister. I rushed back to the first hospital to tell Alice, but I was too late. She had gone into distress and the doctors couldn't save her. Alice died during childbirth. She left behind a crying, beautiful baby girl. But as I looked at that baby, something strange happened. A terrifying recognition. The baby looked exactly like the one Helen had just given birth to. In that moment, something bold and wild was born in me. A decision. And I said within myself, I will not let Helen raise her sister's child. Not with Eddie. Not with this wickedness. So I took Alice's child from the hospital nursery and sneaked out carefully and quietly and drove straight back to the other hospital where Helen was resting. It was pure luck that Helen's baby had slight jaundice and then placed in an incubator away from Helen's arms. I sneaked in, swapped the babies, and vanished like a ghost. From that day, the baby Helen raised and hated, the one she tortured, insulted, and treated like filthy rag, is actually her real biological daughter. And Sandra, that she pampered and sent to the best schools, is actually Alice's daughter. I kept this secret buried in my heart for years. But just learning about what that poor girl, Ukeme, went through, I could no longer stay silent.
So, could it be that Ukeme was your own child all along?
The judge whispered to Helen, who was weeping like a woman whose soul had been shattered. No, it's a lie, Helen shouted, her face pale. Sandra looks like me. Sandra must be my child. The judge ordered for a DNA test, and it was confirmed. Ukeme was Madame Helen's biological daughter. She had unknowingly been punishing her own daughter.
Yes, the DNA result is confirmed.
The judge said when the court case resumed after 2 weeks.
Blood does not lie, but wickedness does. Mrs. Helen, you have been maltreating your own child. And Mr. Eddie, she is still your daughter, and you dig this filthy thing to her. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're a disgrace to the male gender.
Helen went mad that very moment. She began to scream in tongues, yanking at her hair. Her eyes soaked in tears as her lawyer tried to make her stay calm, but she couldn't stay calm. Helen shouted,
Ukeme, oh my Ukeme, I'm so sorry. Forgive me, my daughter. Ukeme, you are my blood.
But Ukeme was not in the courtroom, for children were not allowed in the courts. Helen was just talking to herself, shouting like a mad woman. She had been unknowingly pampering and taking care of Alice's child and treating her own child like shit. Eddie was sentenced to 25 years for child molestation. Helen received 18 years jail sentence for child cruelty and attempted murder. Emen only got 6 months because she openly confessed and collaborated with the investigation. Ukeme became a symbol. Her story exploded online and on the news media. Hashtags Justice for Ukeme trended across all social media. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday citizens posted tearful videos. And then something unexpected happened. The First Lady of Nigeria saw the CCTV footage. Her heart broke.
Where is the child now?
She asked. Within days, Ukeme was flown to Abuja, the capital city, under tight security. The First Lady publicly adopted Ukeme as her own daughter, and she now lived in Aso Rock with her new family. Her tattered slippers replaced with soft leather sandals. Her wounds began to heal. A top skin therapist was employed to treat the physical scars. A child psychologist worked daily with Ukeme. And 2 years later, Ukeme, now 11 years old, stood on the podium at her new secondary school matriculation ceremony. She was radiant, her skin had healed, her posture was proud, and her eyes, though still holding the echoes of pain, gleamed like sunrise after a long storm. As she walked up to the microphone in her matriculation gown, silence fell over the crowd. Her voice no longer a whisper, but clear, true, and rang out.
My name is Ukeme, and it means patience in Ibibio. 2 years ago, I was hawking bottled water with an iron scar on my back. I was denied the luxury of a classroom. I slept in a good shed. I ate leftover food from the dustbin. And I was beaten with wires, burned with pressing iron, and called a witch by my own mother, the mother who didn't know I was hers. I thought God forgot me, but He didn't. He was watching me. I stand here to be, not because I'm the strongest girl in Nigeria, but because love found me. When the First Lady took me in, I thought I was dreaming. When I was enrolled in school, I felt alive again because I love education, and I believe every child deserves the right to be educated, and every child deserves love. And my new mommy, the First Lady, tells me every day that I am beautiful. The name Ukeme is not just mine. It belongs to every child who is suffering in silence, every child in pain, every child forgotten. Please do not give up, but patiently hold on to God, for He will not forsake you.
Then Ukeme's voice started trembling and she began to cry. Some people in the crowd cried with her. The First Lady, seated at the front, stood up and walked to Ukeme, hugged her, and whispered,
Your story is just getting started, my child. You are chosen.
And as the crowd stood and gave a standing ovation, Ukeme smiled. Not the shy, broken smile of a child who had seen too much pain, but the bold, bright smile of a girl who had walked through fire and survived, because she had always believed that she is blessed with the ability to be a winner.